If your organization is ready to embrace edge computing, we have good news. The 2023 AT&T Cybersecurity Insights Report provides everything you need to know to get started. In the report, we identify the common characteristics of edge computing. We found edge use cases are rapidly coming online, and we reveal how to secure edge computing. Most importantly, you'll learn how to prepare for your edge ecosystem. Get your complimentary copy of the report today. Visit securityweekly.com/ATT cybersecurity. That's securityweekly.com/ATT cybersecurity. Weekly. For this episode's second segment, we're going to discuss Okta's recent customer support system breach. We haven't done this, I think, since Uber's breach last year, but it's something I like to do when we have a lot of details about a breach and there's lessons to be learned. So this is not about whose fault it is. There's more of a blameless postmortem. Like, let's dig into this. Let's see what happened and see what everyone can learn from this. How others can maybe avoid stuff like this in the future. So it's interesting. The trend has kind of been that the attackers share details with journalists or with researchers. And in this case, it's actually customers of Okta who happen to also be security vendors that we have a lot of these details from. So I don't know how that hits you, Katie, but that this was a very odd case, I think.
It was definitely an odd case. It was definitely a little unsettling when I saw it come across. And of course, you've referred to it in the last couple of podcasts about why this is so problematic. But I think anytime we see something that involves an identity provider, it makes it even more uncomfortable, right? Because we are hoping, at least now in 2023, that we have enough accuracy in the identity realm to keep us safe and secure online. So we started with this very uncomfortable situation, and now looking at it, obviously you're going to go through that in a little more depth in a second, but it's really uncomfortable and unsettling when you have to talk about this, I think, no matter who you are, no matter how many breaches, and you've certainly studied hundreds of breaches at this point. It's always a little uncomfortable and a little unsettling when it involves an identity provider.
Yeah. And we have these security vendors now. I mean, maybe not even call them security vendors, right? Identity is a lot more than just security. It's enablement. It allows single sign-on, makes it a lot easier. There's actually a lot more. There's actual ROI with using somebody like an Okta or Entra ID or something like that for employees. Less having to sign in, less having to juggle passwords, less having to have several different types of MFA or OTPs on their phones or different apps on their phones. The more you can kind of consolidate the authentication piece and the authorization piece, makes it easier on employees and makes it easier on the folks maintaining these systems. Than having to do that separately with every single internal app, SaaS app, cloud, everything. So it's an important job, and the only criticism I'll get my criticism out here early. You definitely want somebody like an Okta to really, really, really take security seriously when they're in such a delicate position there. They're such a target for attackers for this reason, because they're connected into everything. We saw China go after Microsoft because that was easier than going after 25 independent companies. Once they got into Microsoft 365, then we saw them specifically target 25 companies that they were after. And from those companies, you could see the trend of what they were going after. But Okta's in that same position. It's easier to hack one company than 100, right? And if you need access to more than one, they're going to go after the supply chain. They're going to go after, the upstream service provider that gives you that broad access.
Yeah, think about it. No matter what kind of crime you might want to commit, if it's effectively the same effort to focus on the hub and reach a whole bunch of customers, why wouldn't you do that? The criminals they're not stupid, and they've done their research. So yeah, sure. Why not go after the big target and let things just spread? In this case, again, you're probably going to go through this in more detail, but we haven't seen a huge amount of problems. What's the phrase I'm looking for? We haven't seen a lot of downstream effects from this quite yet. We probably will.
Right.
But we haven't seen a lot of companies stepping up and saying, we got hit.
Yeah.
And it was a result of that. So fortunately, we saw two companies very quickly come up and say, hey, we found it. We found the problem. Nothing happened. So hopefully there'll be more of that.
I think we got very, very lucky here in that the attackers targeted security companies, and the security companies they targeted did take security very seriously and were able to detect and respond pretty quickly to the attack. But yeah, just to sum up the rest of my criticism here, it was disappointing to see Okta's response to it because, and to their credit, they in the write-up here, which I should share to the Discord right now. In the write-up, they do admit, there was a 2-week period, where we didn't identify the cause of the issue here, where the problem was, the fact that we were the problem, because 1Password was the first one to notify them about this issue on September 28th, and Okta responded to them, we don't see anything, must be on your side. So this poor engineer at 1Password probably had his laptop getting torn apart, like because they're thinking, there must be some kind of info stealer malware, something like that, on one of our systems or on the system of the engineer that uploaded this file to Okta, and they're just probably ripping stuff apart. For 2 weeks, I'm sure this engineer felt terrible, and then it was only because Beyond Trust was insisting, no, this must be an issue on your side. That they finally found the source of the problem, which was that folks were, or the attackers were downloading these troubleshooting files from their support site. So
it's you've got to be, yes, you have to feel bad for this engineer, right? Because they thought, everybody thought this person was the cause of it. And, you'd think in today's day and age, it's not a great look having a breach, but it's common because of the complexities of our digital ecosystem. It's common because vulnerabilities and weaknesses happen. So you would think that companies would have better responses to that and also not point a finger, especially at one person. I mean, yes, there are certain incidents that happen because of phishing, and a single person was the infiltration point, right? It's easy for people to get confused. It's easy for people to get scammed. But it's never one person, it's never one machine, and you would think that a company as big as Okta in a space that is directly involved with security would have a little bit better and more mature response to it, because the original denial thing, it always looks like they're trying to skirt something, and I think at least among the security community, I can't speak about somebody who's not in the security community because I've been in it so many years, but at least among the security community, you probably have a better reaction if they came out and said, listen, we know something happened. we're investigating it. We can't tell you quite yet because we haven't gone through the whole process. But the initial, hey, denial, you have nothing to worry about, we're blaming this one person thing, it's just not a great response. And it doesn't really bode well. And I really wish, to your point, that companies would think about that more and think more about what it means, not just for their customer base, but for the future of security, and for security to be taken seriously by the rest of the business, because we still occasionally have gaffes where security teams do something that doesn't quite align with the business. And then we see the problems of the business overriding security, either their requirements or their requests or whatever it may be. And it's because of things like this and the inability to communicate very clearly and honestly, even if it's, I don't know, or we can't tell you yet, that's a better response, I think.
Right. And it's So let me run through what happened. I don't want to get too much deeper into this without actually going through how the breach went down. So I'm gonna go through a quick summary of what happened here. So at some point, I'm not sure that they know the initial point when the attacker got in. I think it was they know enough to know they narrowed it down to a single employee, and a single employee had signed into their personal Google profile on Chrome on their work computer. But they were using a service account to log in. I'm not sure why they were using a service account to log in. One of the downsides of a service account is because it's a non-human account, you can't tie MFA to it. So this would have been just a username and password. And then they saved that username and password with Chrome, which if you have sync turned on in Chrome, it will not only save that username and password on that system, but to the cloud. So any system or, your phone, anything you log into with Chrome now will have that username and password saved in it. And so they think that's how the attackers got access to this support portal. To this customer support system. So I assume that service account had something to do with the customer support system. Instead, this is an identity and authentication company. This employee should have been logging in with their secure MFA-enabled work account, Okta account, not with this service account. So not sure why that was the case, but I think a lot of weird little edge cases like that happen all the time. You see it all over the place where a process isn't as secure as it should be, and people just trying to get stuff done will do insecure things like this. So pretty typical case. Shouldn't be a typical case for Okta, but that's how the attackers got in. And then the attackers, using the support website, and I assume they realized this before they broke into it, but one of the steps that Okta will have customers go through troubleshooting something is to upload a HAR file. And what a HAR file is, if you go to your web browser and you go to a website that you log into that has a login prompt, and then you right-click and you click on Inspect, and you bring up the dev tools, and you go to Network, and you hit Record in the Network segment, and then you log into that website, it's going to save all that data, including the credentials, any OAuth keys that you're issued are going to get saved inside that Inspect session, that dev tools session. And then if you right-click on any of those elements on the Network tab, you'll be given an option to save it as a HAR file. So that will save all that data in a plain text file. So now your credentials, your OAuth key is saved as plain text in a file that ends in a .har extension on your computer. This is a very dangerous thing to do. But this is what support for Okta, and I'm sure 100 other companies out there, their support folks are doing the same thing. They're having people save these HAR files, upload them to the support site, and the attackers clearly knew this, or at least discovered it, and realized they could target Beyond Trust, they could target Cloudflare, they could target 1Password, because they all had Okta credentials saved in these plain text files sitting on this portal. Now, Okta, if you look at their documentation, their support documentation, they do advise you to scrub any credentials from these HAR files before uploading them. And I even went back in the web.archive.org, the Wayback Machine, and yes, those instructions were there before this breach happened. That wasn't something that they hastily added after the fact.
Right.
So they said the right thing, but so doing my own testing, I found it's not easy to sanitize these HAR files. Like, depending on the web application, the variable or the cookie that your OAuth keys or your credentials are stored in could have any name. And most of the HAR file sanitizer tools out there don't show you the data. Like, even the one that Cloudflare kind of threw together after this incident, I think they're trying to make a point here. Cloudflare was very snarky in its responses, somewhat deservedly, and I couldn't do it. So I used an application that I use all the time. It's a custom application that we use here at Security Weekly as my test, and I couldn't do it. I couldn't find the credentials in there without looking at the raw text file. So most of the people that are uploading this stuff, I don't think they have the skills necessary to be able to sanitize these files. So this is one of those cases where it's an easy lesson learned to say, you idiots, you should have just patched, or you should have just sanitized your HAR files. Like that's what you'll see a lot of people yelling on, well, it used to be Twitter, whatever social media we use now to yell at people.
Use that platform. Come on, I know it's off topic, but come on.
But yeah. So that was one of the first lessons I found, is that it's not easy to sanitize these files. We need better tools to sanitize them, or better training, or what have you. But
or both, yeah. It shouldn't be hard, that hard for somebody in a technical position with,
right,
a modicum amount of experience to do almost anything that basic, right? Because that's been the problem with security all along. It shouldn't be that hard, because if we make it that hard, people aren't going to do it. If there's that much friction, they're not going to do it.
Right. Well, and they're trying to fix something, right? So what do people do when they're trying to just get something working? They make really bad decisions. That's where people get administrative access to things and root access to things, because if you give somebody all the privileges, if you take that easy path, you'll get your problem solved really quickly, but you're also trading off a large amount of risk for that. So I don't think the onus should have been entirely on Okta's customers to sanitize these files either. I think Okta should have recognized, like it's on them to look at these files systematically and say, oh no one is sanitizing these files. We should probably do something about that, because we are currently storing plain text credentials to Cloudflare, to 1Password, to BeyondTrust, and 2 other customers we don't know the names of yet. Because they said 5 customers were had sessions hijacked, and only 3 of those are public that we know about. So this also should have been on them to say, we told them to sanitize it, they're not sanitizing it. So we got to do something to protect these files. And they should have realized this. They should have been encrypting those files, figured out a way to sanitize them themselves. But you can't just let customers upload plain text credentials and just leave them in plain text on the support portal. So that was a big miss on their part there.
Why do you think that happened in the first place? Because I agree with you. I mean, I'm sure it cost time and money. I'm sure there were resources that could have been allocated to that they would say, hey, we're focused on other things. But if you are, in effect, a security company, and I can see people who would say, well, it's not really security. I think it's a security company. They should have these processes there, versus saying, we're going to do something that we know has a high likelihood of prompting a security event. I don't want to say incident, I don't want to say breach, but we know that something like this, we've known for years, never store secrets in clear text. So why do you think a company like that with, with a good history and good reputation and enough money, why do you think that would happen?
I think it's a process failure, right? Like security architecture, threat mapping. Whoever's setting up this support site and is in charge of securing it, probably not somebody with a security background. Maybe it's somebody on the customer success side of the organization. It's just it's one of those gaps, one of those areas where maybe the CISO over at Okta didn't really think about it much, didn't really think that there could be anything that sensitive over there. It just didn't occur to anybody. They didn't do the architecture and the threat mapping work, or if they did, this was just a risk that they missed, that they overlooked. But yeah, at some level, I wonder if maybe somebody said something and they weren't listened to or something like that, because at some level, like these support folks have to realize, okay, I'm having them upload these things and it's not supposed to have secrets in it, and it's got secrets in it. Or maybe they just don't notice. Maybe it's just so transparent to everybody what's in these HAR files, and their process doesn't involve them actually seeing what's in it. Maybe. Or maybe they actually need those secrets in it to be able to do the troubleshooting. I don't know what a typical Okta troubleshooting session looks like that involves uploading HAR files. So I'm missing part of the picture here, so I can't really give a complete answer.
Yeah, of course. Some of this is speculation, and it's super easy, to throw peanuts from the cheap seats. So
yeah, very true. Very true. And keep that in mind as we dole out any criticism here. One piece of criticism I will dole out, though, is in the final update to their to the notice about this breach. They say threat actor gained unauthorized access to files inside Okta's customer support system associated with 134 Okta customers, or less than 1% of Okta customers. That kind of rubbed me the wrong way. Like I feel like this is not the opportunity to try and play down the issue here, especially when that 1% of Okta customers included 1Password and Cloudflare. I don't care if it affected 2 customers. Those are some concerning customers, that you're putting at risk here. So I don't think this was the right place to try and downplay it by saying it's only 1%. Like, I know they want to preserve customer confidence. They don't want people to start leaving their platform, but I think that had the opposite effect on me.
Yeah, I mean, regardless of who the customers were, big customers, reputable customers, thank goodness, customers with good security teams, right? But what if you're a little company who this severely affects, right? Yeah. You're not there thinking, okay, this wasn't a big deal because I'm not a household name, right? So if a company is paying you for your service, whether they're paying you $10 or $10 million, you don't just go, it was only these guys. It's not. It doesn't say a lot about how they, and maybe it was just a big gaffe on the communications team or whomever wrote that, but you don't downplay your customers ever. I can see trying to make your company sound great, but putting your customers in a light like, we don't, we're not taking this as seriously because it's only 2 customers. Well, it doesn't matter if you're a big customer or a small customer. If you suffer a breach because some other company had some sort of pass-through compromise, that's a big deal to you.
Yeah. And I know part of it, they're a public company. They got, general counsels telling them, okay, here's certain things you have to say. So, some of it probably comes from that. I think they're a public company. I think we had Tyler join us. Tyler, do you know if Okta is a public company?
We are. I am, and they are a publicly traded company. Sorry, I got feedback there for a split second. Yes, they're a publicly traded company. I believe the stock has not done so well recently, but I haven't checked in quite some time. But I have no idea what you guys are talking about other than asking that question.
Yeah, we're talking about their breach.
Oh,
the one that impacted 1Password and Cloudflare and BeyondTrust.
And then the victim blaming that came alongside it.
Yep. Yeah. So yeah. Let me run the rest of the way through this, and then we'll get to some of the lessons learned, because there's a lot of rabbit holes to dive down. So 1Password was the first to discover it, reported it to Okta. Okta said, we don't see anything wrong. So they started digging internally. Then on October 2nd, just a few days later, BeyondTrust got hit. Also, like 1Password, detected it really quickly and reported it to Okta, I think, the next day. And again, Okta still doesn't think this is an issue for them. So they told BeyondTrust, don't know what to tell you, but, we don't see anything wrong. And so BeyondTrust kept at it. They went back, looked at their systems, and kept on insisting, no, it must be something on your side. And eventually, in that back and forth with BeyondTrust, Okta did discover the issue. They put out a notice, that they did have an incident, and they started to work it as an incident. And while they're working it as an incident, the attackers hit Cloudflare on October 18th. So already more than 2 weeks after BeyondTrust got hit. So the attackers have been in here. I think the total exposure was September 28th through October 17th. And, so they eventually eject the attacker. And so I take that back. They hadn't announced it yet. It wasn't until after Cloudflare published about it that Okta finally publicly announced that, yes, this was us. It was an issue on our systems. So, yeah, that's one of the criticisms, is that I think it was a week and a half, something like 10 days between the point when they realized, yes, they did have a breach, and when they actually publicly announced it. So I think up until that point, 1Password was still ripping their own stuff apart, convinced that it must have been an issue on their side. So that was pretty rough for 1Password. But
Adrian?
Each of these, and it's linked in the blog post. 1Password, BeyondTrust, and Cloudflare all did their own write-ups, and those are all linked in there. You can read those.
Yeah, so I have a question though, because this is just my dumb reptilian brain here. Could it be that they just didn't understand it? Like, I know they get ripped and passing the buck and punting it off. Like, could it be it just didn't hit the right people, didn't have the right process, or they just didn't understand the flaw until it was too late?
Yeah, so they actually they reference this in their write-up. Okta does. They say, for a period of 14 days while actively investigating, Okta did not identify suspicious downloads in our logs. And what it was BeyondTrust gave them the IP address that the attacker had hit them with. And when they searched for that IP address, that's when Okta was able to find the malicious activity on their side.
Got it. Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, it's just, I hate to jump on Okta too bad. Obviously, there were mistakes made in spots where they probably could have improved on their knowledge, improved their workflow, improved their speed. But sometimes you just don't know, and you just can't figure it out. You know what I mean? Sometimes that stuff just takes time.
Yeah, I think in the part that you missed earlier, the big takeaway for Okta was not realizing that they were asking customers to upload credentials and OAuth keys in plain text, and they were storing those in plain text on their support site. I think that's the biggest lesson, I think, to take away here, is that you have to do some really good threat mapping and security architecture of even the most boring customer success systems to ensure you're not doing something crazy like storing Cloudflare's credentials in plain text.
Got it.
So if you take nothing else away, I think realizing that by asking people to upload HAR files, and so they did have in their instructions a note in red, in bold, that said, sanitize your credentials from your HAR files before uploading them. People were not doing that. Nobody was doing that. And as I found through my own testing, it's really hard to do that. So I understand why people aren't doing that. They're working with support. They're just trying to get problems fixed. They don't care. They're just uploading the HAR file with all the credentials in it. So at some point, Okta should have realized, oh crap, they're not following the instructions, and now we're storing everybody's plain text creds. And that should have been and that just didn't happen, right? The attackers figured that out before they did. So kind of a common refrain with breaches is just attackers figuring out that a process is insecure before the folks that put together that process figured that out. So yeah, that is lesson 1 on my blog post here, protect your session tokens. And so we've I think talked through most of that. So one of the recommendations I give here is post MFA, we have these OAuth tokens and things like that. That probably shouldn't be your only line of defense. It shouldn't be as easy as just copying a cookie. Earlier interview, we were talking about info stealers that basically just steal all your browser cookies and your logged in sessions. Like we need something a bit more there than it shouldn't be as simple as moving a cookie from your laptop to my laptop and that gets me logged in, right? So I think we got to move past that at some point. I know it's there for convenience, but for enterprise processes, maybe something additional there, like a certificate on the laptop at least. That makes it a bit harder for me to just steal a cookie and log in as you. And then the other recommendations are just around handling HAR files. So HAR file is just a saved web session. In this case, since Okta is an authentication provider, they were saved web sessions with login info in them. So that's that. And then lesson number 2, I think one of the interesting things here is if you read the write-ups from 1Password, Beyond Trust, and Cloudflare here, they all did a really good job at detecting this, like within minutes. I think they all might have detected this in an hour or less, which was really, really impressive. And they figured it out mostly through unusual behavior, not by looking for malware or anything like that. It was weird behavior. In some cases, employees reported it. In other cases, it was discovered by SOCs, by people whose job it is to detect threats. So just the way it's supposed to work. So that kind of gave me a little bit of hope. Sorry,
Adrian,
Tyler, you were trying to say something.
Since you're much more intimate on the specific details of that unusual behavior, was it like, I'm going to call it obnoxiously loud unusual behavior, meaning like somebody went in and changed the admin password or something, right? Or, something fundamentally that would trigger alarms? Yeah. Or was it, weird little login date changes? Last login was yesterday and we haven't done it since a week. Or, what I'm getting at is, could this have been a slow and low attack had the attackers been more stealthy about it?
Yeah, so Beyond Trust didn't give a lot of details beyond the fact that they used their own product to discover it, and they, very, chest out on that one. And 1Password, a 1Password employee received an email saying that they generated an Okta report on administrative accounts, and they're like, "Wait a minute, I didn't ask for a report," and that's how they discovered it. And then Cloudflare, I don't think provided many details on how they discovered it, but yeah, like creating new admin accounts, looking for new admin accounts. It wasn't super sneaky stuff. It was stuff where the attacker probably should have known, okay, this is going to generate something that somebody's going to be able to see.
Got it.
So yeah, I mean, that really supports a lot of the work we do in building SOCs and things like that and detective controls. And I think it reinforces yet again something we talked about in the first segment about instead of looking for malware, look for attackers, right? Like attackers have to do some very specific things that they can't hide. They have to steal credentials. They have to use those credentials. In some cases, they're going to create admin accounts from hosts that shouldn't be able to create admin accounts. These things are there. You can detect them, and the fact that these 3 security companies did is proof that this approach can work.
Basic system admin.
Yeah. So lesson 3 is SaaS vendors are common targets. If your name is Okta and the world uses you to log into things, guess what? you are the low-hanging fruit to get access to other maybe more difficult targets. So yeah, expect the attacks.
It's true, and it's like when people hate on Microsoft because, oh my God, all of these attacks, and it's like, well, yeah, if your target was that big, everybody would come after you too, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's where Okta is. It's in a similar realm. Like, you're a target, you're huge. So many companies, yeah. So I don't necessarily think that, and that's kind of what I was saying before. I don't think the incident was a slight on Okta, in that any big company is going to be targeted, and some of those attack attempts are going to become breaches. They just are. It's the communication that bothers me.
Yeah, definitely that piece. I think is one of the bigger criticisms, is the fact that you've got 1Password and BeyondTrust calling up Okta saying, hey, I think you got an issue. We're both getting hacked, and it's via our Okta accounts, and we can't find any malicious stuff other than the attacks. And at that point, Okta should be like, yeah, we'll take a closer look. They shouldn't be saying, nah, we checked, it's not us. So yeah, that's an incident response lesson learned there. Yeah. And so also here, it's not just, I'm not just saying Okta should know that they have a target painted on their back. Of course they know that. But I'm also saying customers of Okta should know that Okta has a target painted on their back. And you should have some kind of plan for, if your third party, if your authentication provider, especially your identity provider, gets hacked, what's the plan there? Do you have enough logs to determine if it's something on your side or something on their side? I think, like most breaches, this one is a great example to use for your tabletops or your, simulated incident response sessions. Lesson 4 here is that zero trust principles seem to work pretty well. That was another pattern we saw in the write-ups from 1Password, Cloudflare, and BeyondTrust, is that they were able to limit the extent of the attack, and all of them say that the attackers were not able to get anywhere near customer workloads or customer data. And on top of that, being able to detect it pretty quick really tells I'm sorry, Tyler, it tells the zero trust story pretty well.
I was just going to say the same thing. No. Tyler's cringing on the other side of the camera, but it is what it is.
No, stop. You guys paint me out to be some anti-ZT zealot. I love it in theory. I love the framework and principles. I just don't like it when people use it as a product.
Yeah.
But you can say that about any term, right? If the analyst and the vendor communities let it get out of hand, it can be literally anything. And that's what happened with zero trust. It is 100% viable. You don't hate zero trust. You hate the marketing around zero trust.
Yes, I hate when people use the term to say we're a zero trust product, because it doesn't mean anything.
So the final lesson that I wrote up here is that MFA isn't a binary control. It's not an on-off. There's good MFA. There's less good MFA. Maybe all MFA is better than none. But in some cases, even if you have MFA enabled, we learned from this breach, you may only have it for certain types of logins. So one of the things that was noted here, I think it was BeyondTrust, noted that the attacker tried to log in via web interface, and MFA controls prevented them from doing that. Then the attacker just went to authenticate via API, and the API didn't ask for MFA. So they were able to just log in with username and password using Okta's API, and that bypassed the MFA interface. That's
a whole other problem, right? The fact that your APIs don't match your authentication authorization controls for the actual app itself, that's a whole other configuration state problem that should have been caught with some kind of API security platform.
Yeah. Yeah, like I imagine, it's physical analogy being like having armed guards at a gate, and a highly secure gate, and then like half a mile down the road, there's a a door in the fence with a master lock, right? I still wouldn't sneak in because armed guards, but still. I would not do that pen test. No armed guards. Yeah, so that's again, that's kind of threat mapping. That's one of the things you learn going through these tabletops, maybe having red team, purple team, pen test. Like somebody should discover, hey, the MFA works great when people are logging in on the web interface, but guess what? Your API doesn't require it. Because an API is intended to be used in an automated manner in many cases. So you can't put traditional MFA on it, but we are starting to see technologies where non-human accounts can have some form of multi-factor authentication. And it's usually going to be something that they already know or have, like a certificate, right? Some kind of public-private key used to authorize the identity. The same way that web browsers exchange keys, right? So, yeah, again, if you do end up in this situation, put extra monitoring in place to make sure that, non-human identities, you have the benefit of those making patterns. They don't look like humans. Typically, if I connect my product to your product over the API, it's going to reach out once every 60 minutes exactly, or once a day at the same time every single day. It's not going to vary that much, right? It's going to look like an automated process. Whereas when an attacker uses it to come in, your behavior is going to look a whole lot different. So there are opportunities there to set up monitoring that will let you know. The other note here on lesson 5, Cloudflare said they got their money's worth out of hard security keys like YubiKeys. So that form of multi-factor authentication stopped this attack for them. No opportunity to do like push auths or something like that. Like in the Uber case, we saw that they just annoyed the person, in the 17th time in that Uber breach, they said fine and hit yes. It's not going to happen with a physical security key, as much as I hate them, because I don't want to have to carry them. All right, and that's those are all the lessons I had from this. I urge people to go read about it. For each of these lessons, I was kind of reading from a blog post I put together here that you can find on valentsecurity.com. If you look at the blogs there, it was posted on November 1st, so it should be pretty easy to find. It's also in the show notes. And for each of these lessons, I listed 3 or 4 recommendations. So the only thing that's not in there that I kind of wish I put in there is a bit more detail on how sanitizing HAR files is difficult, and I don't think the average employee is going to be able to do it. Literally, I think you'd have to be a developer of the web app to successfully sanitize HAR files, or at least be intimate, very intimate with the web app that you've created a HAR file of.
So Adrian, quick question on that. If there was an enterprising young developer or hacker out there who wanted to make an automated tool to do that, do you think there would it be possible?
I think it should be possible. OAuth keys should have a pattern to them. You're not guaranteed it's going to be an OAuth key. I think if you have a combination of the HAR file and the website it came from, I think it would be a little bit easier to automate. Because then you could actually go to the website and see what the variable name is, for username, password. You kind of have to successfully log in. I don't know. I think it should be possible, and I want to say, so the tools for sanitizing HAR files that everybody shared after this happened do not do that. They rely on you knowing what the variable name is or the name of the cookie is that you need to delete out of that HAR file, and then you resave the HAR file. So basically, it's not much more useful than manually editing this text file. But I want to say the other day I did see something that said it automatically finds these and tries to delete them. You could probably do it with AI. You could probably do it with ChatGPT, but then again, you're sending ChatGPT plain text credentials.
Challenge accepted.
Which you don't want to do. You probably don't want to send OpenAI your clear text creds.
I'm betting that there are people out there who are doing that.
So 2 seconds of quick Google searching has led me to Dark Reading, GitHub, Atlassian Marketplace. You name it, there's a bunch of them. Cloudflare blog, introducing the harsh sanitizer. There is a bunch of them out there. It's just finding the right one that's going to work for you and finding if it's going to be easier if you have to have a PhD in computer science to actually use it.
Right. And most of those, like the Cloudflare one, I tried that one, and it just parses the file for you. So it makes it easier than going through the raw text. It says, here's all the variables and the names of the variables. And you're like, I don't know what CT underscore is. Like, is that a secret? I don't know. So, that's something, I should really maybe update the blog post or do a separate post on how to do that. So, yeah, maybe I'll do more research on making HAR files easier to sanitize. But honestly, I think it would be better if the company asking you to upload it, had that piece as well, or help.
Well, what you could do too, Adrian, is if you're a company asking to upload HAR files, you should have a cleanser on your side that works for your site by default.
Yeah, absolutely. And I agree.
Every HAR file that comes in automatically gets run through the cleanser before it's saved.
Right. Ideally, you shouldn't even be depending on that, because that still means that you're transmitting that clear text credential, and it's only getting cleaned up when it lands on the other side. I think most companies would want to clean it before even sending it, but that's true. Certainly better than nothing, and would have saved a lot of pain in this case on Okta's part. All right, I think that's good for this segment. I think we've covered all the important things. Urge you to go read about it yourself, test your own company, see how you would do if your Okta credentials were compromised. Make sure you have a plan, or if you use one login, whoever you use. So go read up on this, check it out, share it with your team, and put in defenses against it. All right, so we'll be back in a few moments with the weekly enterprise news, so stick around.